Hello and welcome back to the second part of me reading the SPFBO books. This one, I have 5 more books to read for you, and that is the last of this series that you're gonna see. If you don't know, you can go watch part 1. There is a competition every year created by Mark Lawrence called the Self-Published Fantasy Blog Off, where it's a bunch of reviewers that come together and they review indie published books until there's 10 finalists, and then from the 10 finalists they all get ranked and there's one winner. And it's just a competition that's there to help you find vetted self-pub that is incredible, because there are some incredible self-pub books out there. So this is part 2, and I made a thing called SPFBO Cassidys version this year. I got 10 other booktubers, Instagram bloggers together to do this with me, and so there is a playlist on my channel filled with all of their vlogs as well, and then there is a website which is linked in the description bar below. And we have a system for rating it. Everything is talked over in part 1 of this, so please go watch that if you haven't already. But let's just get right into me reading the books, because I'm very excited to read all these. Hello! I figured I needed to update you on Tethered Spirits. I've made it to the end of part 1, on to part 2, which is about 120 pages into the book, right there. We have a really pretty graphic there, and I figured I would tell you my initial thoughts, but let's do that while I put on a face mask, because it's nighttime and my skin needs some help. I have a bunch of face masks here. I don't know which one to do. My skin is really dry currently, so it really needs something that's gonna like hydrate it. Oh, this one looks good. The Dr. Jart one. 100 pages in, and my first initial thoughts are that I'm liking it, but that there is one character, there's 3 POVs, and there's one character that I'm just not vibing with. It is the character who has amnesia, and I think one of my problems with amnesia, this is so gooey, is that how am I supposed to connect to a character when a character doesn't even know who they are? Like, the character doesn't know themselves, so how am I supposed to know that character? And I really struggle with that. Oh my lord, this is intense. What the frick is going on? That's so cold! And then the other thing I'm not loving right now is the magic system, but that is a personal preference, because I prefer a harder magic system. I prefer a magic system with a lot of rules. I prefer it to have like negatives and positives throughout. Also, this is really cool, it comes in 2 parts. I prefer my magic system to just kind of be more restricted and harsh, I guess. Is like, this is more like an essence based, just like you have magic and you can do whatever with it. And I haven't really been given any hard or fast like limits to it. Oh god. But other than that, I'm really intrigued. We have like spirit companions, and I'm intrigued by the spirit companions a lot. And I do like the other 2 characters out of the 3, and I'm intrigued with where it's going. It's done some cool world building. We've seen different cultures. We've seen, I'm just gonna hold this up so that I can speak properly. We've seen like different parts of the world. Oh, the other thing I think I'm learning in this book is that I don't overly like when a story has all their characters together. I prefer a story where the characters are kind of spread out and then they come together eventually, just because I get to see more of that world, and I really do love the world building. But I am still intrigued by this one, and I need to let this sit on my face for like 15 minutes. It looks so creepy. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading. I'm on 189. I'm currently shocked with a lot of the themes and conversations we're having in this book. I'm really enjoying that part of it. I wish we kind of dived a little bit deeper. I think a lot of this book is a little bit more surface level, but the themes that we're discussing are beautiful, and I want to discuss them more. That is probably my biggest problem with a lot of books. I want to be part of the conversations. I may be rethinking the fact when I say I'm not character driven. I think I may be character driven, because like I really want more moments with these characters and the messages and the themes and these conversations between characters in this book, but we're getting like a little bit of them. I just want more. Let's talk about Tethered Spirits. I finished this book a couple days ago. I've kind of sat on my feelings, and I wanted to discuss it with you. Well, I say I wanted to. I have to discuss it with you. That's kind of the point of these vlogs. I actually thoroughly enjoyed this one. It's not the strongest book ever for me. It falls around a 3-star easily, but one of those higher 3 stars, a 3 stars. I want to continue. I want to read the next book in the series. It wasn't like just like an okay read, like, but it wasn't like the best read ever, if that makes sense. I think that there are some really surprising elements to this. I really enjoyed some of the conversations we had, discussions. It was more of a heavy hitter. We had really big conversations on grief that I really enjoyed, and colonialism, and just a lot of that kind of stuff that I was not expecting in this, but we got, and I liked, and I was happy that it was in this book. I think for me, it's what makes me want to continue the series, is those conversations we had. I think they were done decently enough that I'm intrigued by future books in the series, because there are some things that fell flat in this for me. And when we're talking about ratings, I think one of those specifically is the characters. This book is a book that kind of is a one note. It's kind of missing a little bit of definition and like depth to it for me. We kind of just like skim the surface of a lot of things. Although we do have those conversations, I kind of wish that we dived deeper into them. And I think in order to do that, we needed to understand and care about our characters more. They weren't as nuanced as I wanted them to be. I didn't like really like, I wasn't rooting for a single character in terms of like emotional. Like if any of them died, I'd be like, okay, cool, let's continue the story. Where like I want to feel emotional satisfaction. I want to be crying when a character dies. I want to be happy for their successes. I want those soft moments to have so much impact on me. I think I said it earlier, I think I'm deciding I may be more character driven than I thought I was, because I feel like that's what this book was really lacking for me, was those character moments, those small moments. That being said, I still liked all three characters. I just wanted more from them. So I think I'm sitting at about a 5. I struggled between a 4 and a 5, but I think the concept of the fact that I still enjoyed reading the characters made the book a 5. And there's 2 characters I cared a lot more about than one. That one character really brings that rating down. It could have been a 6, I think, without that character. I don't know. It's really hard to do this, is what I've learned. Telling you exactly why I give something a rating is really hard. I think for plot, I'm gonna give it a 7. The plot's predictable, but it's not badly written. I actually think it could have gotten an 8, but for me, the pacing of the story was off. It was too fast paced that like I didn't care as much about the plot as I wanted to. But that being said, I still enjoyed where the plot went. I liked the story we went on. I liked seeing the little bits and pieces. I actually wish this book had been longer to give me those in-between moments that I wanted. And you know what, those are probably more character moments, but I think that would have helped me with the plot, because it would have helped me care a little bit more about the plot too. As I said, we just skim the surface of a lot of things. It's like bam, 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 bam. Lots of things happen. There's a lot of bullet points to hit in this book, and I kind of wish we had spent more time developing to those bullet points versus just being like, oh, we need to do this, 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 we need to do this. I kind of wish we had those smaller moments, but I still enjoyed the story, so I'm gonna give it a 7. World building for me, I think I'm gonna give a 6.5. As I said earlier, we were just missing those small moments. This book is very surface level. I'm gonna say the same like 18 things over and over again in this, but that really was just the struggle I had for it. It had so many interesting elements. I just wanted more of it, and it was the same with the world building. The magic system is kind of where it really falls short for me and why it's getting a bit of a lower rating, just because I was really intrigued with why the magic system would work that way. I wanted to know more about the like lifespans, when like what happens when you attach with a spirit animal, and like the lifespans that you shorten and all of that, how the magic really works. It's a lot more essence based than I personally enjoy most of the time, just because we don't have rules and restrictions with it. Like, what are the limits to your powers and abilities? This is probably a personal thing. These are things I look for in books, but not all fantasy books have to have those things. But I do wish we had a little bit more explanation even on just like some of those elements of like maybe where magic came from and the curses. And I think we could get more of that in future books, so I'm excited to continue, but right now we're not getting that. But we did get a lot of cultures. We did get a desert setting. We got some vivid settings. I think the city at the end was very vivid. I liked those elements. As I said, they happened a little bit too fast, and I wish we had more time spent in those settings, but I did enjoy them, and I think the series could get a better world building skill. I think the series could get a better world building score from me as it continues. A weird one for me for writing, I think I'm going to give it a 6.75. I don't think it quite makes it to a 7, but I don't think it's necessarily a 6.5. I enjoyed the writing, and I think all of what it does is intentional, but for me it couldn't get that 7 because, as I said, throughout this entire thing, I wanted more moments. I wanted connections, but like the technical skills of the writing were there for me, but the book just like seemed so surface level in terms of like writing and the like descriptions we got and those moments and like the dialogue we got just all felt very surface level. Now that could be intentional to the writing, so maybe that's not a fair like point to say, but for me that affected my enjoyment and my thoughts on the writing. I think that it could have been a little bit more developed, a little bit more emotional and connecting. So yeah, I think it gets a 6.75 from me. It's just like not quite that 7 that I want to give it, but I don't think it gets a 6 or a 6.5. So I did a little bit of a weird decimal mark, but it will help. It works the same. You can technically put any number out of 10 into this score and it'll work the same to get you your score. So it's fine doing that. But yeah, I do think the writing, it doesn't feel as technically strong as some of the other ones I've read, but it does not feel like some in these feel like the dialogue's not clunky and all of that stuff, but it just doesn't feel as well written. I don't know if I'm explaining things correctly. And now last but not least we have my enjoyment. I think I'm gonna give it a 7. I had a good time with it. It was fast paced, not my favorite read I've ever read, but fast, quick, enjoyable. I'm excited to see where it goes. I liked lots of the messages, as I said. Enjoyment wise, I really liked those conversations we had, and I liked a lot of elements. And for me, in an essence-based magic system, something that is just like power within you that kind of never runs out, I struggle to enjoy those things a lot. And so I think the fact that I did enjoy this one helped. And obviously the little dragon creature and the flame creature, which gives me like Howl's Moving Castle vibes for the flame, was like really interesting and really piqued my enjoyment, and I liked those, and I want to see more of those kind of spirit companions in the next book. But yeah, I'm gonna pick up the next book, so I think that says a lot. Other than that, I don't really know what to tell you about this. Tethered Spirits follows 3 POVs. One is Kirk. One of them, when he dies, he loses all his memories, but he comes back to life, and the other POV ends up helping that POV get to someone they need to get to, and then the last POV is trying to get the dead person, the undead person, they're trying to like work against them, and there's a whole other plot going around, but I feel like it spoils things. But there are these spirit animal companions. If you have magic and you're like a magic wielder and you pass away before your time, before the magic in you can run out, you can actually bond with a living human and steal half of their life force essentially, but you give them magic and you become like a spirit companion. I thought that was really, really cool, and I really liked that element of this story. Also, 3 POVs. If you watch my 5-star audit, another success. I have yet to give a 3 POV book other than Black Sun less than 3 stars. So I'm on a roll with these 3 POVs. If you got a 3 POV book, send it my way. Hi, I'm working on the new Snakes and TBR Stacks board, and I'm listening to Miss Percys. I'm just over 50%, but a funny thing happened, and I actually thought I was done. The audiobook is broken down into 2 parts, and I was at the end of part 1, and I was like thinking it was over, and I was like, what the frick? Literally nothing happens in this book. So I'm kind of laughing at myself, because then it ended and was like, oh, this audiobook is put into 2 parts. And honestly, this rarely happens, but has happened to me twice, and it's often with books that I'm just like waiting to end, because I'm not excited about the second part, which sadly I kind of am waiting for this book to end. It has very similar tones, vibes. It's very like same as Skeleton Sensibilities. I want to say like they're completely different books, but at the same time they're a lot of like, and I think it's interesting that they both made it into SPFBO this year. Obviously it might be a trend, the like Regency romance. So far nothing really has happened in this book, and I'm just kind of like meh about it. I am too plot driven, I think, for this. Like I just don't like the small scale plot, and then the characters aren't gripping me enough at the same time. I think if it's going to be small scale, the characters better be dang good. And for this, I'm just not feeling that. I think it's really beautifully written though, but I'm about probably 65% in maybe. and I'll update you when I'm done now, probably. I won't have another update. I just don't really have a lot to say about this one. I finished Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons, so I figured it's time to chat about it. For my overall experience, I didn't love this book, but I don't really like this type of story. I don't like this style of story. It's just not my go-to story. I think I can appreciate it for what it is, and I think if you like this type of story, you could really like this book. Like, I understand why this is a finalist in SPFBO. It's just not one for me, and that's 100% okay. This, in some ways, reminds me of the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, and then also in some ways it reminds me of Scales and Sensibility. So it's really interesting. I think maybe it's because of just like the type of main character we have and then also the setting. I do think this and Scales are very similar, yet very different in execution, but they do have like a similar story, which I think is very interesting. But I do think it's a story we see often when it comes to like Regency era. But let's discuss things. So for me, one of the weaker parts of this were the characters. I think I talked about this earlier. If you're gonna have a cozier plot, like low stakes plot, then I need really hard-hitting driving characters. For me, I felt like this character was just kind of like one note. We get it, she is a 40-year-old woman who wanted to go on an adventure when she was younger and never did. And I think I kept waiting for her to like kind of go on this adventure, and we never really get there. I feel like the adventure never happens. The high stakes of like a, oh my god, adventure doesn't really happen, I think, till maybe the end of the story. And I think I was just constantly waiting for that. And I think maybe that is part of the fact that this is just not my style of story, because I don't think it's meant to be that way, but it's what I wanted out of the story. I wanted the character to like let go. I wanted to see her blossom and bloom and become like her inner child. I feel very often she was one note, just very like, I don't know how to explain it. This is when I lose words to explain things. I think it's also part of Regency era. She felt like a woman who couldn't get out of her like shell at all, and I felt like a story that was supposed to make her get there. I just wanted more personality. So I ended up giving characters a 6.5 because on top of my feelings on that, we don't see much of the other characters' personalities, and lots of them are, again, just like one note for me. This is the same thing Scales and Sensibilities did. I will say I had this comment about Scales and Sensibility too, how all the characters seem to be like one archetype, but it worked for me in Scales because it went like above and beyond. Like, we took that one archetype, that one emotion, and made it like bang in your face, and it was like over the top, and I enjoyed it. It made it fun. I had a fun read with it. With this one, we didn't get that. I kind of just felt like the characters fell flat for me because they were one note, not that it became the character, if that makes sense. So I gave it a 6.5. Plot-wise, I'm giving it a 7. The plot is small scale. I wanted more from the plot. I really wanted more from the plot. I don't really think it went really anywhere, but again, it's small scale. I kind of had to change my expectations on what the book was meant to do. I think it does what it does. Okay, I think it could do it better. We got a 7 there. I just like, I don't know, I felt like the plot didn't even come until like way later in the second half of the book. I felt like it really should have been set up more in that first half. I felt like I felt like the plot itself felt like it should have been escalated, but never did. A lot of that, and maybe, again, I'm just not a cozy fantasy kind of gal. We're gonna move on to world building, which I gave a 6.5 as well. It does most of it well. Again, a 6.5 is a good score. 6.5 means I did see a lot of great things. I just saw some things that I could have liked improved. Like, a 6 is a pass. It is a great score for a book to get. And so a 6.5, it just, for me, I think the world building could have been a little bit helped in other places with like more about the dragons, and maybe having read more of the text from her great uncle. I think it really felt very confined to the spaces we were in, and I wanted more. I had questions about the dragons. I had questions even about society and how it worked. I keep comparing this to Scales, but something I really liked about Scales was kind of the seeing of other people coming in to our situation, and specifically the like newspaper part. I felt like added a little bit of extra setting and intenseness of the world building. We saw a little bit outside. We had the servants kind of in with the conversation, and in this one I just felt like it felt very isolated, and I had questions about how everything worked. I had questions about I just had questions. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Oh my god. Sometimes I hate book reviews. It's really hard to like get my thoughts out. And something like this, it's like a really hard balance between trying to be somewhat objective, because I would have never picked this book up otherwise, and still being my channel, my reviews. You're here to hear my thoughts on this book. So yeah, it's really hard. But I do think I wanted more from the world building. That's all. I do think the writing in this was really good. I gave it an 8.5. There were a little bit of pacing issues for me. As I said, the plot didn't happen until the last half of the book. But other than that, I do think it was technically well written. I'm not the biggest fan of this writing style, I don't think, in terms of like it's a story being told. Our main character kind of breaks that fourth wall a lot. It has worked for me before. It works for me in Sebastian de Castell's Greatcoats, and it worked for me in Rune of Kings, but it did not work for me in Spellslinger, and I've had some issues with it. I do think it made a really good audiobook because of that. I think I would have struggled a little bit more if I had physically read it. The narrator does a really good job of breaking that fourth wall and feeling more intimate and close. I just didn't really care about a lot of that stuff, so maybe it wasn't the breaking of the fourth wall, it's that I didn't care about those things. Like, I don't care that we use this exclamation point, but like the last sentence didn't have an exclamation point because of this thing. It was more just like maybe I just didn't care about those things. But overall, I think that it had a very, very well written story. I think I've seen that a lot in these SPFBO books, that most of them are well written, and that's what makes them into finalists, I think. And then enjoyment wise, I am just gonna give it a 4. I didn't love this book. I'm sorry to say it. I just didn't really have a good time with it. I was waiting for it to end. Not my type of read. There's nothing wrong with this book. Like, I can't stress that at all. I'm just not a cozy fantasy gal. And I thought maybe I could become one, but I'm not. Like, I just wanted this to end quite early on, which sucks, because I wanted to love it. But I do think it has its audience, and that could be you. So if you like cozy fantasy, try it. Please, please try it, because I'm just not that gal. Okay, next up, I don't know what I'm reading. So when you see the next clip, you'll know, and I'll know too. Hi, I'm at my lake for New Year's Eve, and I have a fancy mimosa cocktail thingy. We have like rosemary and cranberry syrup in it instead of like a juice, so it's like kind of a mimosa, but not really. Yeah, I'm making fancy cocktails all night. Oh, I hear a dog. Solar, hello. Hi, hello. You coming for the rubs? But I wanted to update you on Mysterious Ways. I sadly don't think I'll be finishing Fire of the Forebears since I haven't started it even. And it's the last day of the year. Like, I was hoping to finish them this year, but you'll see this vlog in the new year. So happy new year. Mysterious Ways I could finish today. I'm 65% in. I ended up getting Siri to read it to me, which I know some people probably hate and think will ruin my enjoyment, but I don't find it any differently than when I physically read a book. Like, it's not as great as like a real audiobook, but Siri reading it to me is just the same as me physically reading it. Like, I don't make fun voices or anything in my head, so it's exactly the same for me. But I know some people are probably like, oh, it's gonna ruin your enjoyment. It doesn't. It might for you, but not for me. I at first really didn't like Mysterious Ways, but at around 50%, I'm starting to actually really enjoy parts of it. I think it'll end up being a lower 3-star from me, but I thought it was going to be a 2-star just because it's really, really, really heavy-handed, and I prefer my books to have a little bit more like I want those conversations, but I want a good book first. Like, I want a good book, good plot, good characters before those conversations, and I think this one makes those conversations first and foremost. So I was like kind of struggling with that a little bit, and it was just a little boring, but I am really interested in the underworld. So as soon as they went to the underworld, I found myself a little bit more fascinated. I have a feeling the middle part of this book is going to be the best part for me. I think the ending is probably going to be very heavy-handed again and not as interesting, because what I'm interested in is that world and that like the demons and exploring the world, which is like what they're doing in the meantime before the conclusion. So yeah, I'll keep you updated, but I'm not hating it. I'm not hating it. Oh, he snuggled down. And like, what a view out there. What a view. Honestly, I effed up. And I finished Mysterious Ways 2 months ago. I filled out my spreadsheet 2 months ago, so like these are the stats I gave it after reading, but I forgot to update this final clip. So we're going to try to remember my thoughts, just because Mysterious Ways is a book that, although I liked it, I had complaints about it. I have forgotten so much about this book. It was just like in one ear and out the other. Just not a book that stayed with me, which is kind of like validating the rating I gave it for me. But let's try to go over some things that I didn't like, or some good things I did like about it. Because like, I don't think Mysterious Ways was a bad book. I enjoyed parts of it. I think it was very heavy-handed, and it has a very specific audience. I may not be that audience, and I think that it needed a little bit of revision and re-editing. It just felt very heavy-handed and a lot of useless information for me. The characters, I gave a 4.5. I felt like the characters were cardboard cutouts. There is a side character specifically in this book that a million times, at the first half of the book, we are told that he has personality, but our main character just doesn't see it because she's not willing to see it, which is fine. I was like, okay, cool. Then like, as the journey of our character progresses, because that is what this book is about, we're gonna see that side character now have characters because our main character is willing to like open her eyes and see people for who they are, not just for what she assumes about them. But I kept waiting and waiting and waiting to see his personality, this side character just like blossom, and just didn't exist. It just didn't happen. And our character in general, they were just very much the archetype of the message. Each character is very much the message the author was trying to tell. I just really felt like it was heavy-handed. Didn't really understand their motives. Like, why is the one girl helping this girl? It made no sense to me. I couldn't get behind these characters. The plot, I gave a 5. The plot goes a lot of places. There is a lot of meandering in this story. The parts I liked about this book, it's funny because I think it actually is the meandering. I really liked that underworld setting, but I don't understand why we went there. I don't understand why. I just feel like it wasn't cohesive, and I think maybe my problem with this is that I'm not character driven, and so the plot in this book might have just been the characters' journeys, but since the characters I feel like didn't go on good journeys, the plot also left me, because like I think the idea was the meandering was supposed to help our character grow, but I didn't see that, so it left me with like a 50-50 plot. Like, it was okay. The world building, I enjoyed it. In some ways I really liked elements of it, but I think there was a lot, again, of like useless world building. We go to a massage parlor thing at some point, and I don't know why we went there. We learned about these things, don't know why we went there. I think the world building is very heavy-handed and leans on the fact that you're supposed to know things about this world, which kind of felt a little lazy to me because it's not our world. Where something like Small Miracles is our world, so the fact that it's leaning on the fact that you're supposed to know things is fine because it is humans, it is on Earth. Mysterious Ways is its own world. It is supposed to be a replica of Earth, like there is a reason why it's so familiar, but then there are differences, and I wanted those differences explained more. I didn't want the author to just automatically assume that because I live on Earth, I know what this is. I just felt like that was a little bit lazy. I didn't ever feel immersed in the story. I did like the underworld. That is my favorite part of the story, but I still didn't fully grasp everything. And I'm an epic fantasy reader, so I think I would, but like I was lost a couple times because I think it was trying to be too similar to Earth, but also too different, that it just like left me like, but why is it like that and not like this? Writing, I have a 6. I felt the dialogue in this was very cringe, but I enjoyed the writing for the most part, and my enjoyment was just a 5. It was about a 50-50. I liked a lot of elements of the story. I feel like looking at my review and my ratings, it feels like I didn't. I think that this book has potential. It is a solid draft of a book, but it lost me in a lot of ways. But there are a lot of elements I liked, and I liked the ending of this book. I liked where that story went. I just felt like it was a little too heavy-handed for me, but the idea itself was really cool. I think the author brings in some cool ideas, some unique ideas. It's something different than what you normally read. It just didn't really work for me, but I do know it worked for other people within Cassidy's version, and I think that that's an amazing thing. I do think that if you are more of a character-driven, low-stakes reader, this could work for you. I am a lot more intrigue-driven and high-stakes in my stories, so I think that's also why it didn't work for me. But I definitely do think it has the potential to work for a lot of people, just didn't work for me. Okay, I also need to talk to you guys about A Touch of Light. Sadly, I did not have time to reread this, which is honestly my own fault because I probably did have time, but like I've never reread a book as an adult. I've only reread childhood favorites. I've never reread like a book I've read since I started to pick up reading again. And it's like my own thing. I just like feel like there's so many other books I want to read, and I have a decent enough memory that I don't like to pick up books I've already read again. I know a lot of people love rereading, and one day I think I will fall into rereading, but at this moment in time, there's so many books I need to read. So I did preemptively write down my SPFBO stats for Touch of Light earlier so that I could say them in case I didn't reread it and didn't have new ratings. So let's go over these because this is the clear winner for me. I think there's so many things done well in this book that I loved. For A Touch of Light, I did give the characters an 8. I loved the characters in this. The only one that I struggled with is Adrian, but I personally think that Adrian is meant to be a little bit more one-dimensional just because it's not that he himself is one-dimensional, it's that his sole focus is one thing in this book. Like, it is his sole drive. Like, it is the only thing he cares about, which then makes him feel a little bit one-dimensional, but it is a particular choice of the author to do that, to let you see his story unfold. And so although I struggled within his POVs, I didn't really dock a lot of points for that because I do think it was very intentional. I loved Nasha. Nasha's character, I just feel like she had so much personality and she was just like perfect. I definitely have a character type of my favorite characters, and Nasha fits that type really, really well. Think like the Nona Grays, the Eskas, the Rins. Like, I love just like a younger protagonist female who the world has just thrown everything bad at them, and they're just like spiteful and revengeful, and they make stupid decisions, but they're passionate. That is my type of character, and Nasha fulfills that so well. And Lynn, I loved Lynn. Lynn just like balances the other two, I think, very, very well. And I do love how I think the three characters are all very different, but like fit together and balance each other. I give the plot in A Touch of Light 9. I think that this plot is beautifully woven throughout the entire story. And yes, I did see someone review this and say it feels like book one, like there is of an epic fantasy, and that there is no overarching plot to this book. And I guess this could be a complaint if you didn't like that, but like it is an epic fantasy, and that is something known for the genre. It is very intentional. So I can't dock points for that. I feel like that's not a place where personally I can dock points, because like it is an epic fantasy, and that is like very true to the genre, that this is like the setup for other books. And I think I did dock points in Miss Percys for this, but that's because this is not the same type of story. So, and I do think that I was fulfilled enough within this story based on the character journeys and where they got. Like, Adrian has a solid plot line in this. So does Lynn. Maybe not Nasha, but like the two of them, they have a solid plot. It's just that the overarching plot is not seen. World building, I gave an 8.5. I really, really enjoy the world building. I do think at times it's a little bit like confusing just because it does drop you in and there's no like hand holding. I could have liked a little bit more info dumps in this just to like explain a couple things a little bit more, specifically for the average reader versus like someone like me who I enjoyed being confused, because like I'm not often that way in fantasy. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna trust you and I'm just gonna eat this all up. But yeah, so I did get an 8.5. And then writing got a 9 for me. I've talked about Thiago's prose before. I absolutely adore his prose. I think it's written very, very technically well. Not to say that there aren't some errors sometimes, but I do think like he's just written very, very well, specifically for a debut. And the dialogue is not clunky, and that is my main complaint with writing normally, is the dialogue not sounding properly like something we would say in a story. And then my enjoyment was a 9. I freaking love this book, so I had a great time with it. If you want to know my in-depth thoughts on A Touch of Light, I do have a vlog where I read it for the first time. I will link it down below. I read this and Winds of Strife. They were two fall themed fantasy books. They just like gave me fall based on like the covers or like the concept, and I read 2 amazing books in that vlog, and all my thoughts will be in there. Other than that, that is the last. I gave A Touch of Light an 8.7 overall, which is my highest mark. I do think my system ends up having lower marks than the regular SPFBO contest, since they're just giving out marks. They do tend to give out, I think, a lot more 9s than my spreadsheet allows. So I do think, take that with a grain of salt, that I think our reviews will be a little bit lower than the SPFBO real reviews, just based on how we are grading each book. But yeah, that's it. Oh, it's dark in here, but it's finally time. I've been putting off this book for 2 months. The vlog was supposed to come out 2 months ago, but here I am. I'm gonna start Fire of the Forebears, and I'm gonna finish it, and this vlog is going up soon. I'll keep you guys updated. I'm about 120 pages into Fire of the Forebears, and after all the reviews I had seen, I was not expecting to at least enjoy this at all. Like, the more reviews I saw about it, the more people weren't liking it. But to be honest, I'm not hating it. I understand that the writing isn't the best, the dialogue is kind of clunky, but in ways I can say the exact same thing about the Umbral Storm. I do think, however, this one requires the love of characters more than this one does. This one is fun and drags you forward by like the unique magic system and the world and the adventure going on and like learning new things constantly. And I guess this one does have you continually learning new things, but it's more about the characters we follow and their internal struggles, which I think makes it harder to love with the clunky dialogue and the clunky writing, because characters need to be well written to feel for them. And although I liked the characters in Umbral, I will say that is like the weakest point of it, where this one, with the characters being the weakest point, I think it then spreads out to make more things shine as not so great, if that makes sense. I'm often just finding within the writing style, things are happening like too quickly, like we're missing moments. There's a point where like a guard looks at our character and it's like, hey, you, just obviously staring at her, and the next sentence is just like the girl backing into an alley and hiding. But there was a moment in there where I was like, well, if she's looking at you, she would have watched you go into the alley, and I needed like some kind of moment where like the guard looked away that she could sneak away. Something like that. We're just missing those like connecting moments to make everything flow smoothly, and I've noticed them a lot. Like a lot of times I'm going back and being like, did I miss something in that paragraph? Like, how did we get here? But I didn't miss anything. The writer missed those things. Other than that though, like I am liking it. At this moment in time, I'm confused why there's talking animals. I don't think it matters to the story. We've seen other magical beings and magical creatures that I enjoyed, but the actual animals themselves added nothing to me, at least at this moment in time. But I'm excited to continue. I'll update you probably around like 60% and then when I'm done. I finished Fire of the Forebears last night, and I was pleasantly surprised with this one. Now, it's not my next favorite read, it's not my all-time favorite read, but I went into this honestly expecting to hate it. I kept seeing reviews come out and they weren't great. So I was not expecting to end up giving this a 3-star personally, and I'm really happy that I didn't hate it. That's always good. Now, a summary of what this is about, the synopsis of this book. Fire of the Forebears follows a world with a bunch of magical creatures. We have talking animals, we have centaurs, we have the magic of the world, which is really quite well balanced, I think, just because we do have the good magic and the bad magic, and they're obviously like, I love like a yin and yang magic system where it's like the good and the bad. And so we have people who touch the good magic, and then we have people who are tainted and touch the bad magic, and there's just a lot that happens. But we follow our protagonist who could be the chosen one. She finds a magical sword, and it sets her on a quest quite early on, because she could be the chosen one to bring down the bad regime. And then our other protagonist is the son of the current king. I preferred his chapters. I really, really liked his chapters. I think mostly because my biggest complaint for this book is the world building. I looked at my friends doing SPFBO Cassidys version with me, and almost all of them gave world building a really good score, but that is my biggest negative in this book. Although I think that there is a lot of world building, there is too much, and it's clunky, and it's not done well enough. So while I guess you could argue it's just not my preferred style, in my opinion it's not that, because I did really enjoy this world, I just felt like it wasn't well thought out. Often things were unnecessary. We have talking animals in this book, and I don't think that there was a reason for them to talk. We stumbled across things that were like lore, but it should have been done better like earlier in the book. We could have had her mother, who is like a bard essentially. She goes around, she tells stories of the old world and all these like myths and legends. We could have had a scene at the beginning where her mom is telling us of these legends, and that would have made so much more world building sense later on in the book. All the clunky world building happened within Kara's POV, so naturally I really liked Tristan's POV just because I felt like I could actually see the potential of the world and the writing within Tristan's POV. I do think that this book starts out a little rocky. It gets better as it goes. I definitely see the author get their footing later on. The characters are not the best characters. They are YA characters. This is a YA book in my opinion. Wow, this hair just like wants to go that way. This is a YA book in my opinion, and that's not a negative. People will think it's a negative. It's just a fact. YA books and adult books have different expectations of them. One is not better than the other. One is definitely more my preferred style, but I still liked this even though I would classify it as YA. But our protagonists are young. The tone of the story is very hopeful. It is very much like seen through our young protagonist eyes, and it very much felt YA to me. But I don't know even where I was saying. Oh, the characters, they're just like your typical YA archetype for your characters. So like I only gave characters a 6 just because it just wasn't my favorite. They weren't the most fleshed out, but I will say I loved them at the end, and there is a budding romance in this book that is like not seen. I loved the way the romance was handled in this because it is YA and you expect those characters to get together, but they don't. But like I still felt their chemistry, and like the ending of the book I was like, oh, so sweet. So I did give the characters a 6. For me, the plot is the highest score, which on everyone else on Cassidy's version that's read it so far, besides Dom, because I guess Dom loved this book, so I'm not going to count Dom in this, because Dom's scores are like much higher than mine. But like Rachel and Brie, they gave plot such a low score, but for me, I loved the plot, because although it's a basic fantasy plot, I loved that things that happened in the first 100 pages came back to matter later on. We met characters early on that then mattered later on. We had little bits of information that did matter later on. So I think the plot just like intertwined throughout the story quite well. I will say the pacing kind of sucked, and the end is full of action, and so if you're not an action-driven reader, if you don't like those kind of books, the action will get old for you really quickly, just because like it is a good 150 pages of action scenes. But I also liked just the way those were written, because we had a POV where we would see what was happening in the action, and then we'd have another POV, but it wasn't to just like overlap during that action, but it was to give you a more like wide scope of what was happening in the story. So like a building would crash, and you would watch in the one POV like what was happening, this building crashing, and then in the next POV there'd just be like a small like sentence being like, she heard a big boom and she didn't know what it was. We knew it was the building crashing because we just saw it, and I thought that was like a lot of fun. World building for me did get a 6. As I said, it was just like clunky, just wasn't well thought out in my opinion. It felt like a first draft and it needed a little bit more work. The writing got a 6. I don't think the writing is terrible. It is better than a lot of indie I've read. Sorry guys, but like there are some that out there that like aren't great at writing. The dialogue in this is a little clunky. The writing is very descriptive, but that is a fantasy thing. Like this is not as descriptive as like The Hobbit or even like The Eye of the World, but there is like a lot of useless description in it. So that's just like whether that was your taste or not, I think. But I do think that in like the writing did work generally. It was just a little bit clunky. And then my enjoyment got a 7. I ended up really enjoying the story. If there was a sequel, I would probably pick it up. I'm interested to know what happens within the politics of this book. And I think the next book would have been very political, but obviously, like, sadly, this author did pass away, so we won't be getting a second book. But I will say this book reads like a standalone. There is no need for a second book after what I read. But, like, if there had been a second book, I probably would have continued. I did enjoy it enough. But anyways, that is my last SPFBO read. So I'm gonna go get ready for the day because I have some videos to film, and then I'm going to do a brief overview of all my SPFBO thoughts for you guys. Okay, so SPFBO Cassidys version is at an end for me, but we still have many vlogs and reviews coming through with so many of the other participants, so please keep checking back to that playlist because I'll keep adding things to it, or the website down below. But I'm very excited. I was correct about some books and really, really wrong about other books. Here is my regular predictions against our final ranking. So, of course, I think it's great to see that A Touch of Light is my winner. I am not surprised. But Umbral Storm came in second, which enjoyment was just so high for it. Then we have Small Miracles, which just, like, I'm shook that I liked this. I predicted this to be on the bottom, and it made it to 3rd place. That's insane. Just shows you how little I know my reading taste. Scales and Sensibility came in 4th. I didn't think I'd hate this one. I think it's 2 spots up from where it was supposed to be, but I just didn't think it would be in the first half. This is gonna get big. Well, then we have Fire of the Forebears, and that's in 5th place, and I predicted 4th place actually for this, so not that bad. And then in the ranking we have Miss Percys, and I would just like to say that this is one where I think that this is really well written, but not my type of book, because if I'm actually ranking for enjoyment, this comes in 2nd last. But based on the critiques for all of the things that I had to give it for, it does come out to be 6th place. But, like, it's 9th in my enjoyment-wise. It's the only one I think that changes positions, really. Like, obviously other ones change positions due to this one, but, like, this one I did not have a fun time with, but I just think it was really, really well written, and I'm just not the reader for it. But that's going there. And then we have Tethered Spirits, which I enjoyed. You know what? I enjoyed most of these. This was a success. I enjoyed pretty much every single book I read here. 13th Hour was kind of a letdown just because I expected it to be higher up. I think I thought it was going to be 6th spot, but maybe this type of story just doesn't work for me with, like, the urban setting and the steampunk. And then I have a placeholder, but we have just, like, Mysterious Ways. I don't own that book. And Mysterious Ways is pretty much where I thought it would be. It came into 2nd last, and I thought it would be 3rd last. So, and then in dead last, which is pretty close, is A Song for the Void. I just don't think this book is fantasy. I do not think it belongs in a fantasy competition. I'm shocked how it got here. Like, it is cosmic horror, and I think that you can separate horror from fantasy. Like, speculative things happen within horror. That does not make it fantasy. I also think the fantastical elements of this remind me more of sci-fi than fantasy, but even then, it is historical cosmic horror. Like, that is what it is. It is not fantasy. It is not sci-fi. It does not belong in this competition, in my personal opinion. And I'm not going to be, I mean, I don't really care, like, who wins in the end, because, like, I'm just happy that books are getting love. But, like, if this wins, I'm gonna be confused. This is getting high ratings, and I get that it's, like, a well-written book, but I think it should lose points for not being fantasy, because they have done that in the past, where they've cut points in half since it wasn't fantasy. So, yeah, that's last place, and I thought it would be 2nd last place. There we go. This is too heavy. I am hoping that at the end of this, when this is done, all of my co-participants have until the end of April to read all their SPFBO books. But I'm hoping that maybe in May I can get together a live show with everyone, and we can all discuss our thoughts, because we have I think everybody has an unpopular opinion somewhere. So for me, I think my unpopular opinion is that I didn't like the 13th Hour. Also, my opinions on Fire of the Forebears so far, with, like, the with a couple people feels a little unpopular. Like, we all have some book that worked for us that didn't work for the majority of the others, or vice versa, that didn't work for us but worked for the majority of others. So I do think it'll be a really interesting conversation, and I'm hoping to get that scheduled. That will probably happen in May. But anyways, I've had so much fun with this. I've read a decent amount of SPFBO books, and I just want to shout some out that I really loved. Both of these were in SPFBO this year. To be honest, like, these are my winners. I read these for SPFBO vlogs, and I love Nomads of the Sea, and I think more people should read it, and I think that it would have gotten really good scores if it had made it to the final. But just goes to show you how every reviewer is different. And I read this a really long time ago. This was actually the first ARC I ever received, and I didn't love this story because it was YA, but I think it's really well written, and people who love YA will really like it. Another one I read that I really enjoyed was A King's Radiance. I read that. That's in this year's SPFBO. I don't know, I've read a lot. Just a reminder that I have playlists down below that have all of my SPFBO vlogs in them where I read books within them. And I just really love this competition for what it does, and just like getting me to read some new favorites. Like, these two are like, actually I'm gonna say Umbral Storm 2 are like favorites of all time. I cannot wait. I own The Crimson Queen now, and it is a indie archive book on my Patreon and Mel's Patreon. We have a book club for our top tier. It runs bi-monthly, and we're reading the series this year because I loved this one so much. So that's really exciting, just to find new authors that like people can love, and I love that about SPFBO. I love that about this competition. It's just shining a light on books that would never get the light shined on them otherwise. So that's just so much fun, and I cannot wait for next year. I will definitely be trying to read more SPFBO books again next year, and I had a successful enough time with the finalists that I probably will read the finalists again. Whether Cassidy's version is back or not next year depends on a lot of things, but I'm very excited to go through the process again when it restarts, and I am excited to have 2 months off. March and April, I don't have to even think about SPFBO, which is kind of nice, but like, I love this. Love it so much. So thank you to Mark Lawrence. Thank you to all the blogs who participate in this, who put this together. This has to be so much work, and we greatly appreciate it. And I know indie authors greatly appreciate it, because it just means that they get their books out there and people read them, and they can find their target audience. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for watching this video. If you made it all the way to the end of this video and you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me some sort of award emoji, some sort of award emoji, like a participation thingy, trophy, something like that. I don't know what I'm going at now. And then if you are feeling chatty, let me know if there is an indie that you read for SPFBO that you loved, if there's one that you're looking forward to reading, if there's an indie I need to pick up ASAP. I'm finishing the War Eternal series currently, and I've been obsessed with that. And then if you'd like to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon, all linked on the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day.